to another bite-sized edition of the SV650 rebuild. The correct banjo bolt came, so I thought I'd fit it. 5-minute job with new washers, and now the front brake system's virtually sorted. Just need to get the pins and the brake pads and we should be good to go, or stop as the case may be. Okay, so it was time to turn my attention to the clocks. I've ordered a set of clocks from eBay which have arrived. They were dirt cheap. I'm well impressed. The guy's name's Zed Sheds. Got quite a few SV650 bits. £17 for a set of clocks. He'd also got some genuine SV650 bar end weights, so I thought I'll have them off him as well. They were only £4. But when they arrived, he'd put a set of normal weights in, which weren't any use because the SV has solid bars, so I couldn't fit them. Messaged him and give him his due. The guy said he'd had a bit of a brain fade and sent me the proper ones. Free of charge, told me to keep the other ones. Had a bit of a discussion with myself whether to go for some cheap Koso replicas or stick with standard. Well, I've gone with standard, but I also wanted to use my own original clocks, so it was a case of taking these apart and rob Peter to pay Paul. So the bike will still have its original mileage on it, but the clocks obviously be in a lot better condition. Pretty simple job really, about 6 screws in the back, a couple of little screws that are missed, but that got sorted, and then the clock just comes apart. So stripped the original clocks down and did the same with the set that I got from eBay and just swapped the fronts over. So if anybody's in line for a set of clocks nice and cheap, you can have these by all means, but the front glass is all cracked on the speedo part. Hey, voila, one decent set of clocks. Looking at how I'm going to attach these clocks onto the FZ frame, and it doesn't look too bad actually. I've got to come up with an idea. I was going to weld a steel plate onto the frame itself, but now I've thought about it, I've got 2 holes there. I might as well just bolt in a steel plate onto it and then fitting the clocks onto the steel plate. So I've got myself a piece of paper and a pen and drew around the clock. Out with the punch and made the holes where the mounting bolts are. I've still got a bit of steel plate knocking around from when I was doing the scrap heap challenge, so I thought, well, I might as well use it up. I'm always into saving money. If I've got something, I'll use it. So now I've got sort of a rough template, tried it out on the back of the clocks. Holes are in exactly the right place, seems spot on. And then transferred that onto my piece of steel with a Sharpie. Then it was out with the grinder and cut the template out. Did have a bit of an issue with my angle grinder as well. I was cutting through the steel and the blade caught the bench and actually shattered into pieces. I must admit that was a proper brown trouser moment. In fact, it scared me that much I ended up cutting the rest of the template out with a hacksaw and file. So centre punched the holes, got my drill out and drilled the mounting points out. I also took the rubber mounts off the old Suzuki fairing frame, measured the holes up and drilled those through as well.
I wanna feel I belong.
Blimey, look at that drill bit bend. Little bit too much pressure, methinks.
I wanna feel it with those blue skies. Oh. And when
So we used an 11mm HSS bit after drilling the small pilot holes.
I have nothing doing.
And the look that I was having with power tools at the time, I thought I better stick the piece in the vise and do it properly this time instead of trying to hold on to it. If an 11mm drill bit grabs hold of that piece of steel, I can see that flying.
You're gonna feel you belong, but we all belong. And it's
Next part, put in the rubber mounts, and they fitted as snug as a bug in a rug. I was one happy little puppy.
and when I take my turn, I wanna feel like I have nothing doing.
Well, the proof of the pudding was in the eating. Time to fit the clocks and see if they do fit and make sure my measurements are correct. And I must admit, I wasn't disappointed.
Fall into the left, I am falling
When I do things like this, sometimes I actually amaze myself.
through all I love.
But it is true what they say. Measure twice, cut once, and job's a good one. I've also roughly cut out the hole for the plug for the clocks. Just got to tidy it all up now when I pluck up the courage to use my grinder. But I have noticed that one of the FZ clock mounts is in the way of the plug, so I'm going to have to chop that off.
And it's
Right, so courage plucked, out with the grinder and took off the lug for the FZ clocks, and then basically took the grinding wheel and cleaned it all up.
I wanna feel like I have nothing.
Now my mind's always running 10 to the dozen, thinking, right, what can I use, what can I do? With these two holes where the FZ clock's mounted, I was wondering if I'd got any rubber mounts knocking around anywhere. Well, again, this is where the SV fairing frame came to the rescue. These are the rubber mounts that normally hold the headlight in. Yet another result, they fit perfectly. More money saved for Mr. Tightwad. Well, come on, we are in a recession.
Face out.
Drilled a couple of pilot holes in my little plate and offered it up just to see whether it fit. Once again, looks like my measuring's coming along quite nicely. So drilled 6.5mm holes and took a couple of bolts and nuts and screwed the plate onto the fairing bracket. And then test fitted the frame onto the bike. Fitted the clocks and they're looking quite good actually. I need to tidy up the back plate and then I'll probably sand the fairing frame down, get rid of all the rust, a few coats of primer and paint, and should be good to go. Now this is where I couldn't resist myself. I ended up getting the battery, putting it on the bike and thought, well, it's time to check the electrics, make sure everything works. As I said in the previous video, it's not really rocket science if you just follow the instructions, and everything's working. I'm fairly chuffed, to say the least.
Hot damn, I step out in your city.
Oil and air filter have arrived, so temptation just got hold of me, straight in the shed. Changed out the old filter, topped it up with new oil, and poured some water into the radiator. Couldn't find my antifreeze, so I'm going to have to buy some more. But for this short run, I'll stick with just using water.
Take back my heart, I know I'm free to be alone as it shakes away my soul. In my life I know I'm guided by a fact so skewed I say, oh.
Out with my little umbilical again, filled it up with fuel, pressed the old starter button, and this happened.
I've been dying.
Why won't she start? Oh, I know. Rocket science has failed me. Traced through the wiring and found a plug that I hadn't actually plugged together. Oh dear, epic fail. But never mind, found it. Engine's running sweet as a nut.
It's clear for me to see that I've been
Right, well, we're coming to the end now of the fairing bracket. We're virtually there. Took it back off the bike, got the wire brush in the vise and gave it a good wire brushing over, and then a couple of coats of paint.
I'm not like another stop of the thought and comparisons in your life. I take myself away from.
Wife's brought me another brew. Lovely.
Till I'm blind, and I'm not gonna be your lady.
Now I was thinking of trying to get the clocks to sit at an angle, so I've come up with these little metal posts with an angular head, just to see if I could make it work really. So I'll fit it all together onto the fairing frame and put the clocks back on, and I thought it looked pretty good.
Just like another shaking the thought of position in this place. I take myself away from all that I want so I can see it in your way. And I'm not gonna be your lady.
I was back out with my fetish tape. Sorry, I was back out with my non-adhesive tape and tidied up all the wiring from the headlights, and also cleaned up all the plugs and sockets with a bit of GT85.
Face my love, she's a one-trick pony and I don't mind it.
Then it was time to put the frame back onto the bike. Feeling quite excited at this stage, I must admit. I have noticed while I was watching the video there is actually a bit of the fairing frame that I've missed painting, so I'll have to go out and I'll have to paint that back up. I did try the steering lock to lock just to make sure everything was okay, and I have noticed that the clutch lever and the choke cable are actually hitting the clocks, so it looks like I'm back to taking those little posts off and going back to having the clocks flat.
Take out the door, the exit's all gone. I don't wanna live in a corner. The wall to wall is closing on me. I don't wanna live in the corner.
Time to tidy all the wiring up. Fixed it up with cable ties so it's all out of the way, ready to put the lights and the fairing back on. And it was time to wire the headlights up and attempt to fit the fairing. This proved a slightly harder job, as it looks like the fairing itself is actually a different year to the fairing frame that I've got. But it's glass fibre and I've got to do some work to it anyway because it's cracked and broken, so I'll sort that out later date. Okay, so there we have it. Fairing's all fitted and done, clocks are on, everything seems to be working okay, the engine's running, things are looking up. I've got some new bodywork coming shortly in the form of a different seat unit. I've also got another cheapo exhaust coming, so we're going to try that. I do quite like the sound of that Ducati exhaust though, I must admit, so that might be staying. Right, so that's it for this video. All that's left for me to say is the usual thing. Thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next instalment.
I don't want to be apart.